and then Trump is heading to Ankara, and then suddenly we've got he decided to start bombing Iran. What do you make of his statements? What's your analysis of everything, and how far could this go? Is he just trying to control the Strait of Hormuz, or other people that have been yelling that, hey, the war's not over, this is all part of the plan, they just want breathing space before they continue their operation to capture Cargo Island or whatever? Do you think this argument is gaining more weight?
I don't think there is any grand plan. I think this is Trump rug pull number 7, and it may be the final one for his own political tenure and for the short-term, near-term, mid-term future of Vice President Vance. I think that this needed to hold. And now that it hasn't, as you had Philip on earlier in the day, it was becoming more apparent that the oil market manipulation that you discussed with Chris before that is the better explanation than a supposed supply glut or demand destruction. That now that Russia's turning off its diesel exports, China's turning on its refining capacity. That you look at that, it looks like what Trump admitted 2 weeks ago is likely just around the corner, which is the spike in the oil cost again, which is more likely to trigger a crash economically than anything else. Iran is now talking about withdrawal from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, talking about not only shutting down the strait entirely. They said if Trump did this, they'd shut it down, and that they would completely terminate the memorandum of understanding. They haven't failed to deliver on anything they've said so far. That they're going to likely start to look at closing down the other strait through the Houthis in Yemen, and that will be more consequential than the military escalation will be the economic escalation. That's Iran's true leverage. And whereas they would have been under pressure from China to keep the strait open, Trump has basically greenlit the Chinese to in turn greenlight Iran recontrolling and restricting the Strait of Hormuz. Trump wants to fantasize in his delusional world that he has escalatory dominance when it's been proven the opposite now for 4 months. And the fact that Vance couldn't hold this for even a month means that his political capital has been expended to the max, extended as far as it can go, and Trump rug pulls it. And he rug pulls it at the same time that he rug pulls any kind of peace negotiation on Ukraine and Russia, starts talking about escalation in the middle of all of this on the Russian side of the aisle, which is just plain insanity. The Trump is going to turn out to combine the incompetence of Hoover, the corruption of LBJ, the arrogance of the Bushes, and the deceptions of the Clintons and the Obamas. He may go down as the worst president in American history. That's what he's on path for. And every time Vance gives him an opportunity to escape his own self-inflicted damage, he jumps back in the car and wants to go off the cliff and see how fast he can go while he does it. That's what I see. I don't see rationality. I see irrationality. I don't see logic. I see illogical behavior. I see behavior that doesn't make sense from any traditional Trumpian perspective of his career and his legacy and his history up to this point. I see politically suicidal behavior in a delusional mindset and mentality that is going to be disastrous for the Republican Party. This accelerates the timetable of the midterm being a disaster and a debacle, and it increases the probability of impeachments. And probably the best hope right now for J.D. Vance and that wing of the Republican Party, or the Republican Party in general, is that the Democrats see so many House and Senate seats that they actually remove President Trump before the 2028 elections in ways that maybe Vance could course correct before 2028, like Gerald Ford in 1976 almost did. But that's honestly the best hope. The best hope for the Republican Party right now is that Donald Trump is not president in 2028, because if he is, there'll be a Democratic sweep in 2028 of all three branches of government.
Axios just said, Reuters, a U.S. official tells Reuters that the ongoing strikes are expected to be bigger than the ones carried out yesterday. Fucking hell, man.
Yeah, I mean, they have escalatory dominance in both ways.
Why? What's the point of this? What's the point? Iran did not attack any ships today. They sent a clear message yesterday. And why they're pushing it to a level where I just don't think Trump can afford this politically. He cannot afford this economically. You heard the discussion with Philip earlier that you just referenced. He cannot afford this economically. He can't keep screwing his allies in Asia, Europe, mainly the Gulf. I just don't see the argument of trying to force Iran to concede on the Strait of Hormuz is a fair argument. It's a logical argument. I understand. But Iran sustained war for all these weeks, massive bombardment on a daily basis, they're going to fold with these bombings. Now, the only explanation that I have is they're trying to degrade Iran's ability to close the Strait of Hormuz. But the risk that they're undertaking is what worries me. The risk they're undertaking is Iran's emboldened after these massive funeral processions. They're like, you know what, screw this. We're walking away from the MOU. An MOU that Trump desperately needs. It's just not worth the risk.
Not at all. And the problem is, as Larry's well explained, unless you remove all doubt in shippers and insurance companies, the strait stays closed as long as Iran wants it to stay closed. You need to convince them that they have no risk of any mining occurring in the strait, no risk of underwater drones in the strait, no risk of the automated boats in the strait, no risk of drones coming in from Iran, no risk of missiles coming in from Iran. They can't guarantee that. The U.S. can't guarantee that. And consequently, the strait will stay closed as long as insurers and shipping companies are not willing to take the risk. And they're not going to be willing to take the risk, at least not anytime soon. So this is just Trump's delusional thinking. He tried to undermine it, poison pill it, sabotage it, and rug pull it. He gets caught doing it. He's been doing this for months now in some form or fashion. And as soon as he gets caught doing it, Iran punishes him for doing it. And then he doubles down rather than backing off. It's incompetency on steroids. It's the art of the no deal, the Trump second term disaster. He's become the caricature. So many people thought of him that he never was before. And this is politically disastrous, economically a debacle. And what happens if Iran does cut the undersea cables that feed the internet around that part of the world?
They're playing with fire. Exactly. That's the fire they're playing with. Or what if they decide to start striking the Gulf? They're like, you know what? Screw all this. Like, why take the risk? Maybe they don't. Maybe the strategy works. Maybe they degrade Iran's ability enough where the carrot of like, hey, we'll unfreeze X number of assets and lift Y number of sanctions for you to not charge a fee to Strait of Hormuz. Maybe it works. Fine, and that's a fair argument. I'm willing to concede that. But what if it doesn't? That's what my biggest worry is. And as you said, what if they strike the Gulf? Or what if they cut the undersea cables? There's so much they can do. Like, we just got some breather when it comes to oil prices. Trump is like, whew, okay, oil prices are down. 2-3 days later, a few days later, bombing the hell out of Iran, risking the closure of the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. And now, by the way, just to kind of update you, renewed attacks on Kesh Island. Bushehr Island still being struck. Bandar Sirik, the same locations are still being struck. The bombing is ongoing. Right after Reuters reported the attacks today will be more significant than yesterday. Iran is claiming they shot down an American drone. So we're just seeing it, and they claimed they shot one down yesterday. We're seeing the repeat from yesterday, but that is the worry that I have. That is the worry that I have. Is just, Robert Pape talks about the escalation trap. It's just all about the just one mistake. One mistake in these attacks could lead to just a trap where we just get into the nonstop kind of everything just unraveling and collapsing.
Well, just look at his idiotic threat to attack the desalination plants, which, by the way, in which he put it, by the way, is intent to commit a war crime. But put that part aside, the people who are at major risk of desalination plants is not Iran. Their water supply is very diversified. Very little of it depends on desalination plants. It's the Gulf that depends on desalination plants. So what happens if they take out those desalination plants? Then you have a refugee crisis on top of everything. And Israel is much more vulnerable than they want to pretend they are. What if Iran really escalates against Israel in a wide range of ways? So there's so much risk economically, geopolitically, in terms of refugee, in terms of immigration, in terms of fuel, in terms of food, in terms of fertilizer, in terms of helium for semiconductor chips, which we already have a crisis in supply in because of the AI boom. Just ask any gamer looking at the cost of those things. So you aggregate these things, it's all a disaster. I mean, your laptops, your computers, those are going way up in price because of the limitation on semiconductors, part of which has been triggered by the limitation on helium that's necessary for those semiconductors coming out of the Gulf. So we got multiple layers and levels of disaster and debacle that's incipient because Iran has always had the escalatory edge. They're willing to withstand more pain than we are, and they're capable of inflicting more pain than we can withstand. And Trump just keeps pretending and living in a fantasy world, in a delusional place. All you got to do is surround him by some neocons and some war whores, like what happened when he went to this NATO summit. And all of a sudden, he's not only doing this insanity against Iran, when Iran offered that second off-ramp, said, we won't pull out of the MOU if you don't attack tonight. We won't escalate if you don't attack tonight. And then he goes and does it again. I mean, he's a toddler with his finger on the nuclear button. That's just a sad reality. I say this is a person who defended Trump for more than a decade, not only in the court of law, but the court of public opinion. He's lost it. What Larry and I talked about 6 months ago, what Iran started to doing to employ shrinks to deal with Trump. They understand that Trump only feels pain, so you have to keep escalating the pain threshold, escalate the fear. So every time we pinprick them, they're going to come back and hit us with a baseball bat. They understand it's the only way to educate Trump. But Trump is just out of control. And then the fact at the same time he's talking nonsense about Russia, Ukraine, about green lighting of further attacks there. I mean, is that a good idea? We're in the middle of an oil supply crisis to further enhance and inflame that issue. Not to mention that he promised to get us out of Ukraine war all the way back, and we're still there. So it's just another failed promise, another betrayal to his voters. I mean, how many of these is he going to compound? It's just incredible incompetency. There's no other. Anybody that still thinks Trump is playing 4D chess doesn't understand the old Thomas Massey lesson. Massey was sitting there talking with some folks, and he was like, "This isn't 4D chess. It's maybe at best 2D checkers." And Massey's wife said, "No, it's checkers where one of them is biting the black chip and the other one's biting the red chip, trying to figure out which one tastes better." That's what Trump is doing in the White House. Maybe the black chip, maybe the red chip. It's embarrassing what a debacle this second term has become.
Just a report now of U.S. attack is unconfirmed on an Army ground forces base in Zahedan. That's a first since the ceasefire. Senior military advisor to the Supreme Leader Mohsen Rezai, who's a very senior person in Iran. So whoever transgresses against you transgress against him in the same way as he transgressed against you. The transgressing enemy and his accomplices will be severely punished. What the freaking grammar today, Mohsen. Just another basic threat. But the question I have, are you worried that maybe this is all part of something bigger? That we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. They're trying to, the US is trying to get Iran not to control the Strait of Hormuz and vice versa, etc. But putting all these, the political costs, the economic costs, do you think that maybe Trump is, like one of my guests told me earlier, he's already decided to go all out, and this is just the process of, kind of clearing the way for a much bigger operation?
The problem with that is it's just practicalities. We don't have the troop size to invade Iran. We just don't. And the logistics.
But what if it's just Card Island, something smaller?
Even that, there he is terrified of what Joe Kent warned, that he would end up with hostages and look like Jimmy Carter on a global stage. And so I think that fear is still too dominant. They haven't moved you talk to Larry regularly, Larry will know, but they haven't moved the resources in place for something like that operation to really take place. And even if they did, what does Iran do? They take out the Gulf states' oil architecture. They isolate and take out both straits and close them both down. They probably do cut or consider cutting undersea cables, because then they have the cover they need with China and Russia. And look at the timing of this. How dumb to do this right at the peak of the funeral commemorations, where they're screaming for revenge in the streets of Iran, where they just had the largest human gathering at the same time in human history. That's when you do this? I mean, you're encouraging, incentivizing, motivating the hardest line elements in the hardest line parts of the personality of the leadership of Iran that, as Larry has pointed out repeatedly, all grew up in the Iran-Iraq war. And this is a Shia religious tradition that is built on sacrifice, built on martyrdom. I don't know if you saw one of the videos. I think you were actually showing it a day or two ago, yesterday, where we were hitting some of their port facilities. And you see these cars driving not far away. The cars don't budge. They don't stop and everybody gets out. They don't suddenly go fast everywhere. They just keep bubbling along like it's nothing. That's the mindset you can see in the whole Iranian population. This is tempting and teasing fate. This is repeating the mistake of Rome when they tried to go into the Persians. It's extraordinarily, it's hubris on steroids. And knowing the people that have talked to the president during this time period, it's sad to say there is no grand plan at all. Now, the good news is that means there's no grand plan to invade or to escalate or the rest. It's just instinct. He lacks an executive function. So it goes from thought to emotion and just skips everything else and says, hammer him, hammer him, hammer him. That will discipline him. That will teach him. That will show him. Even though the Iranians keep teaching him repeatedly that costs Trump more than it costs them, that they will never respond to coercive threat of violence. that they will just double down and triple down, and they themselves will go up the escalatory ladder. What happens if they do, in fact, quickly develop nuclear weapons? I mean, why else would you be talking about withdrawing from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty unless your plan is to show off to the world you got nuclear weapons in addition to control over the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, this could be the most embarrassing. What if Trump does send somebody into the islands and they get captured and they get kidnapped and held hostage? Then he's Jimmy Carter on steroids. I mean, those were just diplomats that were held before. This would be direct action of Trump that caused them to be held. So then he could have a kidnapping crisis, an energy crisis, an economy crisis, a geopolitical potential refugee crisis, and a nuclear escalation crisis all at once. It would be the dumbest decision maybe in the history of man, at least the history of modern age in terms of foreign policy. But that's what he's willing to gamble with because he's not in the right state of mind.
Oil futures are relatively quiet. That's I don't know whether maybe I'll give you a counter argument. What if oil futures are not going crazy and not spiking to above $80? Remember the numbers that we were seeing back during the war. It's like out of nowhere goes from 70 to 80, 82. Maybe oil prices are low because they do believe Trump doesn't want war. He did say, by the way, he doesn't want war. Despite all the statements in NATO, not enough people are paying attention to a statement he made. Well, to be honest, some people are not paying attention to any statement, but some people are not, ignoring the statement where he said the MOU is over, true, but he also said, I don't think the Iran war will start again. When they hit, we hit 10 times harder. We might hit them tonight. Anything that's going to happen, it's going to happen very fast. We are not looking for long term. So we're seeing this. And maybe the markets are seeing this as like, all right, cool. Trump is trying to open up the Strait of Hormuz further. He's striking Iran to make sure that they cannot close the Strait of Hormuz, and that's good for oil markets. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt. What if what he's doing right now is aimed at easing the markets while also making sure Iran doesn't charge a fee? And what if he's actually being very calculated? Let me put it out there. I know this is something that you're not going to be happy with. What if this decision, his advisors have decided, it's a calculated decision, say, we know based on interceptions of their communication, because of XYZ, they have orders from Mustafa Khamenei to not retaliate against the Gulf, not to close the Strait of Hormuz, not to escalate to a new level, unless we do ABC. So that means we have a bit of leeway. So let's just strike them, cause them damage so they can't close the Strait of Hormuz, so we can get more ships across, so we can flood the market with even more oil. Just putting it out there. What if there's a bit of method to the madness that we're seeing right now?
The hurdle with that was, one hurdle that I'm aware of, because I'm aware of the conversations inside the White House.
By the way, just so you're aware, the strikes are ongoing as we speak. They took a 10-minute break, and we are having bombing right now of Iran, just to kind of for the audience to know, on all the same places as before. Nothing, no yes, Texas or southern. Everything's in southern Iran. So that goes to the point. Sorry to interrupt you, but goes to the point. Everything is in the south. Everything seems to be focused on Iran's ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. But go ahead on the method to the madness.
Yeah, so the problem with that problem one is I know what conversations have occurred over the last 6 months, and it's just been madness, no method. But secondly, let's say that just kind of coincidentally it aligns with some sort of methodology, as an interpretive filter on it. The difficulty with that is if he would have just stuck with this deal that was cut in early April, we would have already had the markets flooded with oil. Right now, if he would have stuck with this MOU and not tried to sabotage it by creating a separate Omani route, Iran would have opened it up to more, because that's not only what the MOU agreed to, that Iran would restore it back to pre-conflict traffic, but also it's what China wanted to have happen. So Iran was under massive pressure from China to go forward with this. It was one of the main reasons they did it through Pakistan. Now that incentive is now removed because China's not going to put pressure on Iran when Iran's under kinetic attack. And so the probabilities that the oil prices go down compared to going up, as long as this continues, is not likely. Then you have the third level of analysis. It contradicts what Trump just said a few weeks ago, where he said we're on the precipice of a cliff, and given we're on the precipice of a cliff, the deal was better than kinetic conflict. He himself admitted. How does right now the kinetic conflict option improve his options? I don't see that as likely to occur. Iran was agreeing to not charge a fee. They just wanted to control the traffic so they could have that future leverage available to them. We were the ones who were constantly sabotaging, and Trump has done this 100 ways that people don't even know about over the last 3 months, where something was close to getting done at some function and Trump would poison pill it, poison pill it, poison pill it. He's like almost those psychologically ill people that can't handle happiness, so they self-sabotage all the time, their own relationships. That's what Trump has done in the Iran war. Over and over again, he's mostly sabotaged Vance in particular, but he's self-sabotaged himself. That's why I find it very skeptical and doubtful. And then you just look at where Iran stands. Trump's out there saying, oh, I want this to be short. Okay, then what's Iran's motivation then? Make it long. They want there to be real deterrence. And on the sanctions part, how can they trust us? They already don't trust us because of what happened during the JCPOA, where we promised a bunch of sanctions relief we never delivered. They complied. We didn't. There was a lot of confession through projection, claiming that Iran never complies. It's frankly the U.S. that never complies. And then what does he do in the middle of this? He can't even stick to his no sanctions policy for longer than a week. He says, okay, we're going to release all your sanctions and you can get back to profit. No, I don't like it. I'm mad. I'm a toddler. I'm taking my bat and I'm going home. How can Iran trust the U.S. at all? They can't. Trump just proved it. He is deal incapable, which is what the Russians have been saying.
What if it's just because the only reason he's breaching is not because for no reason? It's Iran sticking their guns on wanting to charge a fee and Trump saying no. Maybe it's just a disagreement. It's not like they have a deal, everyone's happy with it, there's no disagreements and the US decides to break it. There is a significant disagreement that the both sides, because we can't just completely ignore the fact that Iran did attack ships. Now, was it their right? Does the MOU allow them to attack ships if they don't follow their orders, etc.? The way I read it, it doesn't. You mentioned Larry a few times. He thinks it does. But either way, whatever the MOU says, Iran did attack ships. Putting Lebanon aside, Lebanon's a different beast. There was some concessions there by Israel, but no one really expected Israel to pull out of Lebanon that quickly. And that was meant to be discussed. At least they're not attacking Beirut, and the strikes within southern Lebanon are extremely limited, down by 90%, 95%. But just going back to the disagreement, there is a disagreement, and this is a response to the disagreement, and Iran struck ships as well. So it's not like, I just don't want to make it seem like everything's going smoothly, everything's good, we know the MOU is going perfectly well. Holy shit, they're bombing Iran.
Well, there's two problems. The first one is Trump doesn't really care about whether they charge a fee. He cares about them controlling the strait as ongoing leverage, that they could shut down traffic whenever they want. That's why Trump was bothered by it going through the Iranian path. Iran was creating protocols so that they could have the future leverage of shutting down the strait whenever they wanted. And Trump didn't like that, even though he signed off to that fund. I mean, that language, if he wanted different language in the MOU, he should have put in different language and got Iran to sign off on it. It says Iran will control how traffic goes through the Straits of Hormuz. And he signed it begrudgingly, but he's been doing this all the time. Like during the negotiations phrase, he'll agree to something, Iran will agree to it, then he'll be like, no, I want a little more. No, I want a little more. No, I want a little more. He does it again and again and again and again and again and again. And from, this will come out at some point, but some of that has leaked out from different places, from Iranian sources, but not from U.S. sources, because Vance keeps things pretty close to the vest, at least publicly. And so that's really but the problem is it's ignoring reality. In other words, you can say, I don't want Iran to have control of the Straits of Hormuz. The reality is the long Iranian coast and the diversity of weapons they have and the psychology of the insurance industry, which is risk averse by nature, and by big shipping companies that went just through this disaster thinking it wouldn't happen, that got stuck there for 3 months with their mariners, basically starving. That given that reality, you can't change it by bombing them. You can't change it by blockading them. And he's already experienced this repeatedly, but he refuses to acknowledge reality. It's the true definition of delusion. When you refuse to you may want, I may want to date Sydney Sweeney. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But Donald Trump is up there thinking, I'm going to marry Sydney Sweeney next week. So that's what positive thinking on steroids, without being tethered to objective realism, which is his current mentality and psychology, creates. He convinces himself, oh no, this will work. And it will be short. Yeah. He's still,
this is Trump. He just posted now, by the way. This is his post. So this is Open Source Intel posting a photo. I thought that photo was not accurate. It's an old photo. Let me check if this is it. So this photo is not from tonight, even though, I don't think this photo is from tonight, by the way. This is an old photo. Anyway, so Open Source Intel, Shabahar, Iran, post that photo. And Trump quote tweets them or posts that screenshot on Truth Social and says, "This is retribution for yesterday's bombing of ships by Iran. If it happens again, it will get much worse." So he's saying it pretty explicitly that this is a response for what happened yesterday. At least that's what he's saying. Is he lying? We don't know. Also, we do know that Al Arabiya is saying that Bahrain participated in tonight's strikes. Not sure what the fuck that means. Bahrain doesn't really have much military capabilities, but they say Bahrain did participate in the strikes. But yeah, your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, it shows where Trump's mindset is. Trump wants to be the head macho guy. He wants deference. He wants the Iran to recognize him as in control, that he dictates the terms, when Iran is never going to do that. It's not in their character. It's not in their self-interest to do so. So given this, all Trump does is trigger escalatory risk for us. Escalatory risk for the global economy, global security, U.S. Domestic politics, the U.S. domestic economy, the global economy. And he just refuses to stay with the same script for longer than a week or two. And once we get this deal in place, he blows it up. I'll ask you, I can't imagine we getting a long-term deal out of this. I think our best shot is if we just get withdrawal. But I cannot. I think Trump is currently deal incapable, at least in this context, in this conflict. Look at his first 2 years. The art of the deal maker has failed to get a single deal through Congress. Not a single trade deal, not a single geopolitical deal, not a single peace deal, nothing. Zero, zilch, zunka, nada. Now, apparently he's won this war 39 times, which I hear is a record. But other than that, he's achieved nothing in this. He's undermined his own political future and legacy and sabotaged the global economy and security in the process. Now, I think the only thing, what this emphasizes and highlights is the rest of the Gulf countries have got to escalate on their own independent path. If they would remove the U.S. military presence and order that from their countries, then they will not be continuous, constant targets of Iran. And it even to a certain degree moots the efficacy of the Straits of Hormuz in that capacity. That's what if they want security for themselves, they want peace for themselves, they want prosperity for themselves, the Gulf Coast needs to divorce the United States of America. Otherwise, this is going to continue to have higher risk than higher rewards, this a marriage between the U.S. and the Gulf states in terms of security.
Yeah. I'm seeing if there's any more attacks. How do you think Iran would respond? You've watched those. By the way, those funerals were freaking massive, man. Holy shit. Holy shit. They
set a record. They set a record for human gathering for any central event in world history. That's why it was particularly bad timing. And that's why I'm saying this is not 4D chess. And there's no method to this madness, just madness. So I think that the risk is, what I would pay attention to is not how Iran responds militarily, but does Iran withdraw from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty? Iran will announce that they're out of the memorandum of understanding. I think that's almost guaranteed now. But the next thing will be, and so that will leave all options open to them. They likely will start to close the Straits of Hormuz and tell ships you can't go through, period. And then they that's the one they've got to navigate with China on. If they withdraw from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, that means they can escalate quickly on the nuclear front in terms of showing nuclear weapons. Because right now, sadly, the lesson of the Middle East, the lesson of North Korea, the lesson of the world in the post-Cold War era has been develop nukes. If you don't develop nukes, we'll take you out whenever we want. We'll break our promises whenever we want. And it was a disastrous thing when we did it. And I suspect if China tells Iran, do not close the straits, then the next move for Iran is to say we're pulling out of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty and show off that nuclear weapon they were threatening that they could have in weeks just a month ago or so.
So how do you think Iran would retaliate now? What would be your guess?
My guess would be the same hits, but probably harder on Bahrain, and they'll probably add militarily hitting Jordan, and they'll try to negotiate with China whether or not to close down the Straits of Hormuz and activate the Houthis and shutting down the other main the one that's been helping is because they've escalated use of it during this conflict. That's allowed some of the oil prices and oil supply to stay calmer than they otherwise would. But I think for that too, they'll want China's permission slip. And if they don't get it, then I think they withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and announce that to the world. And we know what's coming after that.
What do you make of the Ankara meeting, by the way?
I was hopeful at the beginning, because Trump was like, yeah, I'm going to provide, Turkey what they want. I'm going to, remove the sanctions, let them get F-35.
Yeah, that's the Turkey. Maybe let's stick on that one. The F-35s and that's pissing off Israel. Smotrich is talking about a new war. He literally mentioned it as a war. A new war with Turkey. We should prepare for a war with fucking Turkey. This guy is mentally retarded. And Trump is, despite Netanyahu doing the press tour saying Turkey's bad, not F-35s. Trump comes in, praises Erdogan nonstop while he criticizes everyone else in NATO, and says he's seriously considering the F-35s. So does that reaffirm the speculation that there could be a decoupling between the US and Israel, or it's too early to say that?
I think it's a matter of, it does provide confirmation or additional evidence on the side that some of us have been arguing that this is not Israel lobby dictated, that it's, the Israel lobby is a big factor in it in terms of what Trump has done in Iran. But Trump sees this as about Trump and Trump being the head man in charge. I mean, I don't know if you saw the regime change book where he was comparing himself to, Attila the Hun and Genghis Khan, and some people I wish he wasn't comparing himself to. I think in that, it's more aligned with that this is about Trump, wanting a 50-foot golden statue of him in his own library, presidential library, that it's about Trump's own ego. It's almost like a toddler-esque mentality. And for that, him being the king in charge, not Israel being the king in charge, is important. It does help bridge the gap of getting into the process of divorcing Israel. It doesn't solve the underlying problem of where Trump's mindset was, because what I thought was initially a promising gesture turned in by the end of the NATO visit a disaster, especially when you add in some of the comments he was making on Ukraine and Russia. It's
giving
like
them the Patriot, the technology to be able to manufacture Patriots is pretty big. I don't know if they'll be able to do it, because I would just, if they create a factory to make the Patriots, to start producing them, Russia will just keep bombing that factory time and time again. That factory will take months to build anyway. So it does seem more of a symbolic gesture, but he is doubling down on the support to Ukraine. Now, he is betting on Ukraine's strategy of striking deep into Russia and Russia's oil refineries. He's betting on... Okay, so let me just give you an update on Iran, just 2 seconds before we go back to Russia. So the attacks have stopped about 5 minutes ago. So I think they're over. Someone told me they're over, but not a big source, not a source connected to the Trump administration, just an analyst. CNN says a U.S. official told CNN that the ceasefire with Iran has at least temporarily ceased, warning that the situation remains highly fluid and that additional strikes have not been ruled out. In other words, strikes have been ruled out. That's how I look at it. I think this is it, but we'll strike them if they attack us, depending what they do. The latest strikes targeted missiles, drones, and other capabilities that could threaten U.S. assets, including aircraft carriers, as well as military targets around the Strait of Hormuz that could endanger commercial shipping. This operation involved both U.S. Navy and land-based forces. I got a bit scared when they said both. I'm like, which other country? Further offensive strikes remain possible depending on how the situation develops here, how Iran retaliates, what they would do, and what happens in Hormuz. So I think let's see what Iran does in the Strait of Hormuz. But let's just go back to, we'll talk about that Strait of Hormuz and what could happen there. Let's go back to Russia, Ukraine, because if there was no bombing of Iran today and yesterday, everyone would be talking about Ukraine, because that was a pretty big day for the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump supporting Zelensky's strategy of striking deeper into Russia, striking their oil refineries, which is causing energy issues for Putin. Would that work strategically to force Putin to the negotiating table? Some people tell me yes, of course. Other people tell me it'll backfire horribly. But Trump is supporting that strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Trump's been all over the place. He cut a deal in Anchorage last August, that could have ended the war, ended the conflict on really very generous terms to Ukraine, relatively speaking to what Russia could do to Ukraine. And then Trump walked it back within about a month. Couldn't handle blowback or criticism from Europe or other sort of deep state interest in the West that are deeply, deeply attached to hating Russia. And have Russophobia in their blood. But my fundamental broader view is that you're never going to conquer the civilizations of the Chinese panda, the Persian tiger, or the Russian bear. And in that all those who have had fantasies of doing so have sooner or later suffered ignoble defeat. And it is pure hubris to think you can. But Trump is tempted by that hubris. Much of his second term has been dominated by that hubris. And he's going to meet, he's already met his nemesis in the Persian tiger. If Ukraine and Europe and the West, and if he joins them, is going to meet their other nemesis in the Russian bear. Russia could escalate very easily. Russia has substantial escalatory dominance in terms of their troop size, in terms of their military capability, in terms of their intelligence aspects, in terms of their weapons in general. So I think it's a mistake, but it's reaffirming. The other problem with this is Trump had lost the confidence of many of the leadership and people in Russia, that especially after the attempted assassination of Putin, that many in Russian leadership blame not just on Ukraine, but on the CIA. And there were CIA stories that leaked the day of where Trump had given them the green light to do so while playing golf with Ratcliffe, saying what's great about this is it will be so deniable. And it's like, well, then why are you leaking it to the New York Times? Kind of kills the deniability part. But Russia's known all along, and they even showed the U.S. after the attack on Putin's residence that the drones that they were able to obtain in full form, because some they were able to knock down without destroying them, showed that that it was targeting Putin's residence, and that could only come with technologically from the satellites of the U.S. That Ukraine doesn't have that capacity. So the Ukraine I see is desperate. A lot of these efforts are kind of pinpricks. In terms of, and all it does is enrage the Russian population. I mean, it's still it wasn't covered much in the West, but when they hit that girls' school in that part of Luhansk, which is part of now the Russian part of Donbass, it enraged people in Russia. And Trump doing this at this point will further enrage them, and it will tell the leadership class, you can't trust Trump. That don't worry about trying to do deals with Trump. Don't worry about trying to do business with Trump. Treat him as an adversary in a delusional state of mind. Just try to babysit him like an out of control toddler. Try to keep him from blowing up the world that can negatively adversely impact you. But otherwise, just march on. And I think now, what used to be just the 4 regions, I think by the end of this, Ukraine loses Odessa, Ukraine loses Sumy, Ukraine loses Kharkiv, Ukraine loses pretty much everything east of the river and on the Black Sea. And you get stuck with rump Ukraine. Trump was talking about, what? I can't wait to get those minerals. Newsflash, those minerals are in the Donbass. They're now under Russian control. You ain't getting them, Trump. There's no chance of that. But he lives in his own fantasy land, and he had all these people cheerleading it, people wanting him to do a bunch more sanctions on Russia, like that would work. Sanctions package number 227 is somehow going to magically break Russia. This is hubris, and it's hubris at scale, and it's hubris that risks escalation in Russia, maybe worse than the escalatory risk from Iran, because you've had some of the people on that are very significant people in Russia talking about now it's time to start hitting Europe. Now it's time to contemplate a limited nuclear strike. They weren't talking. There's a great description of Russia by Stanislav Kripovnik, who said that it's like a rubber band. We'll pull, you can pull us, you can pull us, you can pull us, and you'll think because we haven't hit back that we won't hit back. But what happens is when we do, it will be hard and fast. Or as the great German leader said, the Russians are slow to get on their horse, but they're fast to ride. And we're encouraging and incentivizing them to get on that horse and ride fast. And I don't think the world really wants to see what that looks like.
In terms of, look, everyone a couple of months ago was talking about Trump using a nuclear weapon, Trump invading Iran. That was the big fear, Trump wiping out a civilization, Trump lost his mind. And I got a lot of slack when I was saying that, guys, I think the war is over. I got mocked like a mofo when that happened. Well, right now we're talking about, does Trump want to even restart the war? Trump wants to control the Strait of Hormuz. And before these attacks, before yesterday, everyone was telling me, or most guests were saying, Trump just wants out. That became the new narrative. And I think that narrative will go back in a few days when things come, if things come. Do you not give him credit for not getting trapped into the worst case scenario everyone was worried about? Everyone was talking about how Israel controls Trump. this whole war was because of Israel. I'm sure Israel influenced him, but they'll decide what happens next. Well, Trump just shat on Israel. J.D. Vance did the same thing. And then he went to Erdogan, praised the hell out of him, a week after criticizing Israel, and now wants to give him F-35s. And when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, from Biden never even speaking to Putin to now Trump normalizing him and Putin speaking, meeting in person, and even talking about, he talked about going to Ukraine, not Russia. And still talking about the war. He's saying both sides want to end the war and trying to end the war. His rhetoric is, we can criticize him sometimes when he's supporting Ukraine rather than trying to end the war. But it's very different to what where Biden was, where it's like anything Russia does, anything Putin says is evil and cannot be trusted. So, I don't want to seem like I'm defending Trump because I'm really upset at this Iran war and the Greenland, Epstein files, etc., but mainly the Iran war. But also all the worst case scenarios that people have been talking about are not materializing. In some cases, the opposite is happening. And maybe in 2 weeks from now, people almost moved on from Iran. At one stage, we started talking about other topics. There would be days where we talk about half of our interviews are about other topics because the narrative is shifting. There's no bombings. Everyone thought the war is over. Everyone moved on. And I was talking to people about the Emirates. It went back to business as usual. Other Gulf countries very similar. Saudi is very similar. So it's like everyone's moved on. Even Iranians some of them started to move on and started thinking about, all right, cool, let's rebuild. What's the future going to look like? So I just want to put that out there and get your thoughts on it about this other possibility.
Well, it's like if you came home and your toddler had totally wrecked the house, but at least hadn't burned it down or killed anybody. It's that sort of, and so it's like you're tempted to, I don't got to put him in a straitjacket. He's trying to be good. And then he escalates the next time you get back and you realize he can't help himself. You got to put him in a straitjacket. I agree with you that Trump wants out of this war and that Trump doesn't, but Trump keeps thinking he can get everything. And sometimes you just got to accept what you can get. You've got to recognize the limits on your authority and your power and the tools in your toolkit. Not everything is a nail that requires a hammer. And it's the lesson he refuses to learn, which I just find baffling.
What if he gets it? But Robert, what if we're wrong? What if he gets it? What if we find out 2 weeks from now the Strait of Iran conceded on the Strait of Hormuz? I don't think they will. But I would give it at least a 30, 35, 40% probability. So one can argue, why not give it a shot? Why not give it a try for a couple of weeks, see how it goes, see if he can actually get them to concede. If they don't, then he'll walk away, which I think is what he will do.
But that's the problem, is this has been Trump's mindset going back to the beginning of the war. That, he says, well, what if we hit him here? What if we hit him there? What if we try an economic thing? What if we try a blockade? What if we try this? What if we try that? And every single time Iran has responded by making it more costly for him to get a deal and not providing him the very thing that he wants to achieve by kinetic purposes, because they want to prove to the world. Let me just put yourself in Iran's mind. How do they deter future military attacks? How do they deter future economic attacks? By proving to the world they can inflict more pain than that part of the world can absorb, and they can absorb more pain than their adversaries can absorb. And otherwise, the moment what they learned from the JCPOA, what they've learned from dealing with Trump, is that if they reciprocate with any degree of deference, any degree of reaching out, any degree of diplomatic resolution, it is perceived, as Professor Mamdani pointed out, as Iranian weakness, Iranian vulnerability, Iranian softness. And what they've learned is they have to be harder than their attacker. And that's what I'm baffled at, is Trump convincing himself of something that hasn't worked for 12 weeks straight. Somehow magically is going to work now. He tried the diplomatic route, and there was more reason to keep going down that path, which had more possibility of progress. A little bit more money here, a little bit more money here, a little bit more money here, so on and so forth. That could have worked, but he hasn't pursued that path. He keeps going back to the kinetic path, the conflict path, even though Iran keeps teaching him, we're going to have to punish you even harsher to deter the future Trumps of the world from doing it in the future.
But you were a lawyer. The carrot and stick approach in general does work. I'd use it in business all the time. Human nature, it does work. Now, too much carrot, too much stick. We could argue that Trump is using a bit too much carrot. He's already beat the shit out of Iran, probably ease up on the sticks. And they're not in the right mindset right now to respond positively to sticks. By the way, I'm not advocating for the sticks. I would just prefer carrots, diplomacy, and that's my way of, how I would like politics to be. But just thinking of it from his mindset, maybe he's just using the stick and it does work.
That's possible. It just hasn't worked as yet. And it's one of the core problems in all of this was Trump not. So if you're in legal negotiations, if you deal with cases, if you're in business negotiations, you really have to understand the other side. Because if you don't, you won't understand what motivates them. Like I've had a lot of cases where I've told the other side, my client has certain emotional, psychological commitments to this. If you push her in a certain way, you're going to get more pushback rather than less. There will be no chance of a negotiated outcome rather than more chance. And some big corporate law firms that are used to pushing people around only know one speed. All they see are nails and all they find are hammers. And what they get themselves into far more trouble than they ever would have before had they simply followed that path. And I think Trump is stuck with Trump used to be great at the carrot approach. He's become obsessed with the stick. And even when it doesn't work, and it doesn't work repeatedly, and the threats don't work, and the threats don't work repeatedly, and yet he won't offer the carrots. He keeps going to the stick. And as long as he keeps doing that, it's the Persian, if you understood the combination of Shia sacrifice, Persian pride, and Iranian nationalism, and the realities of dealing with Trump in the West, then you would know that Iran is always going to punish you for using the stick. They will reward you for using the carrot. They will punish you for using the stick. So, and Trump just won't internalize that lesson.
By the way, Eisenkot's Yakar overtakes Netanyahu's Likud to become the largest party in Israel, according to Israeli Channel 13 poll.
I mean, that's what's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. Have you looked into Eisenkot? Do you know his policies compared to Bibi?
Yeah. In fact, we discussed it a couple of weeks ago. That I was saying, watch for him to surge, because if he surges, it shows that the Israelis themselves are realizing they need to walk
wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're realizing the original Zionists were not a bunch of imperial. That became a second-generation Zionist Likud phenomenon. First generation, as Alistair Cook and others has documented, was we're too small to be going around trying to knock everybody off. Likud took it a whole different direction with the Greater Israel Project. Now they're seeing the consequences of that. Political, marginalization around the world. To be Israeli is to get booed if you're an Olympian, if you're a soccer player, if you're just an ordinary civilian. You get attacked solely because you're Israeli in public, because people are so outraged and enraged, correctly and righteously, about the Israel government's behavior. I mean, even South Park did a version of this, where the mother goes to find Bibi Netanyahu to lecture him on how he's destroying the reputation of Jews globally because of the association between Judaism and Israel, even though that's a mistaken association in my view. So it's great sign to see him rise, because that would mean, and there were people in the JD camp in the White House who wanted to see that happen, that they wanted to see him in particular, not Naftali Bennett, because Naftali Bennett is Bibi without the corruption, him rise as a signal to the Israeli leadership and a signal back to Trump and the Israel lobby here in the U.S., which is deeply aligned with the Likud camp or with the Bennett camp, not with this new camp, that the game is changing even in Israel, that Israel doesn't want this constant bombardment, this constant continuous conflict, having to watch, look over their back all the time, having this public condemnation globally. Well, a little underreported phenomenon, Israel has been losing population during this time period. I mean, the people who've been leaving Israel and not coming back, saying, I'm not here for all this. This isn't what I came for. I came for, to be a little tech economy on the Mediterranean with some ancestral and religious ties to the region. I didn't come to be part of some mini fake empire that wants to control the entire Gulf region and Middle East and wants to get into wars with everybody everywhere, so that the cigar smoking, champagne swigging prime minister and his wife can continue in their full scale corruption without accountability. That's not what I'm here for. And I was the defender of Israel in the court of public opinion because my introduction to Israel was through the peace movement in the 1990s, the Israeli peace movement. That movement had faded out, but you're starting to see it resurrect as what they had originally said and what some of us had said. These wars are not in Israel's geopolitical best interest. If you really care about Israel, you should want them out of Lebanon. You should want them having a humane relationship with the Palestinians, ultimately adopting, I think, a two-state solution, which even Dershowitz has acknowledged for a quarter century is going to be needed to be done, and not bombing everybody in every place everywhere in the world, and not planning on let's go on Turkey. Bibi pitched that to Trump in February. He was like, by the way, next is Turkey. So, that's how nuts this was embedded into them. So it's a great promising hope. And that's why I wish Trump would be on that side of the aisle, because otherwise he has his window of opportunity to renegotiate and renavigate the entire Middle East in a way that's more stable and secure, more peaceful and prosperous long term. And he keeps going off on the other weird direction, which it blows my mind.
Yeah, Robert, appreciate you jumping on, man.
Happy to be here. Hopefully, next time we can just discuss the World Cup or something. Something nice and peaceful.
I would have loved to talk about the World Cup. We've got Malcolm. Malcolm's going to join us now. Actually, I'm going to stop the stream, and we're going to join another one in a few seconds to talk with Malcolm. But he knows every freaking town, village, and city in Iran. So I'm going to have him analyze every single strike, what was struck, and then probably while talking to Malcolm, we'll start seeing alerts go off in Bahrain and Kuwait. That's how it goes.
No doubt.
All right, take care, man. All right, guys, we'll be going live in any second. Literally in 5-10 seconds, I'm going to stop this live and start a new one with Malcolm to go into details on what was struck in Iran, how Iran will retaliate. They're expected to retaliate tonight. Obviously, that's how it usually goes. They already said they'll retaliate. Will they just retaliate against Bahrain, Kuwait, or will we see an expansion? Today's attacks were more significant than yesterday's attacks, where me and Malcolm have gone deep. And you guys know Malcolm, one of the best analysts on the matter. So we'll be going live in a few seconds with Malcolm Nance.